He's the host and creator of one of my favorite shows to perform at in the city. It's called Big Herb's Storytelling Roadshow. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for my friend Adam Selbst.
Yeah!
In 1992, I'm 17 years old, and I'm sitting in Mrs. Buchanan's civics class. I don't know if anyone else knows Mrs. Buchanan. Probably not. I don't remember her name, so I just made that up. So. But in Southside High School, Rockville Centre, Long Island, you would not graduate without passing Mrs. Buchanan's civics class, and you would not pass Mrs. Buchanan's civics class until you had registered to vote. She loved voting, and I felt cool about voting. Whatever, I was planning to vote, but this was the day. She was passing out like the little leaflets so that we could register to vote, and she gave us the spiel. She recommended that we vote for a primary party so that we could cast our votes in primaries. And Mrs. Buchanan and I, we were cool. We got along pretty well, which is why I was surprised when she said the next thing, which is that while she recommended we vote for a primary party, she also highly recommended that we register as Republicans. Well, let me just explain. At 17 years old, I grew up in Rockville Centre, Long Island. It was like the hub of Republican stuff going on. Like 95% of the kids in my class were gonna vote Republican. Me though, I listened to punk rock music. I made my own clothes. I was an artist. All right, you guys aren't getting it. Let me bring you into this a little bit, into my world. I had at that point, I was creating a piece of art where I pinned up a piece of flank steak to wood, and I was documenting its decay, and I called that unironically Caucasian consumer. Yeah, right, didn't see that coming, did you? I was living on the fucking edge. I was most certainly not going to register as a goddamn Republican. Until she explained why. You see, Rockville Centre was part of the town of Hempstead, and the town of Hempstead was controlled by Republicans, and if I wanted one of those cushy beach jobs that, oh, Jesus Christ, all of us wanted, they checked. And if I wanted one of those, I would register as a Republican. So I became a Republican. A year later, as a Republican and my cushy beach job, I learned the first couple of rules of beach camp. You're Republican at beach camp. I met Jimmy, who's my supervisor. Jimmy was 96 years old. He had full-on dementia. And as near as I could tell, Jimmy's actual job was to wander around setting random fires. I learned an important lesson from Jimmy that day, which is that whatever I did at this job, I could not be fired. Which was good, because it had only been one day and I was not popular. I don't know what I did wrong. I think it happened at lunch when I suggested that, to Ryan, that possibly maybe the Irish were not the most oppressed people in the history of the planet. They asked me who was, and I said, I tried to compensate. I don't know, but you know what? They're probably not around anymore. But it was too late. I had lost the crowd. I was deeply unpopular. It was something that I, grimly familiar with. A couple days later, my boss Jack pulled me aside and he said, "Hey, Adam, I got a new job for you. How would you like to work alone for the rest of the summer?" I said, "Well, what do you mean, Jack?" And he brought me into the garage and he said, "How would you like to drive this puppet bus around Long Island putting on puppet shows for little kids for the rest of the summer?" And I know what he was saying to me was that nobody likes you and we want you to go away. But what I heard was really clear. Showbiz. Kid, we think you got it. Which is why I was really disappointed to learn that I would not be putting on the puppet shows. I was just going to drive the puppet bus. A professional puppeteer would be putting on the puppet shows, which is funny because while we had a professional person to operate the puppets, I was not licensed to drive the puppet bus, nor had I read the instruction manual, nor did I know any of the rules of the road. And in fact, the one time they took me out into the garage, into the parking lot to try the puppet bus, if I backed up, the trailer would unhitch, potentially putting hundreds of puppet lives at risk. But folks, the puppeteer was licensed. Nevertheless, I was excited. So I'll let you in on how all these shenanigans works. Is that I would meet the puppeteer at the beginning of the day. She would say hello, and I would hook up the thing to the all the puppets, the trailer to the puppet bus, and I would head off, and she would follow me. I would take the Southern State Expressway, which it turns out is illegal, but I didn't know that because I wasn't licensed. On the first day, this is 1993 now, so I don't know if you remember this, but before there was like Easy Pass or Fast Pass or whatever it's called, there used to be these sort of proto-robotic toll booth things where it was just a basket and a robot and you would fling change at it. And if you got the right amount of change into the basket, you'd win a prize and the arm would come up. And my plan on the Southern State Expressway was to drive around this because I worked for the goddamn town. And they would let me through, but I wasn't paying attention. I was a little flustered. I could barely operate this giant machine. So I was driving down, and I ended up in the robot toll booth lane that you can't argue with, and the puppeteer blocked me in the back, and I didn't know what to do because I didn't have any change. I was 19 years old, and I was totally broke, and they were only paying me $3 an hour or whatever back then. It was ridiculous. So I got out of the truck to go and talk to the puppeteer, maybe get her to back out, give me some change, whatever, we'll figure it out. When I see her wildly gesticulating all over the place, look behind you, and I turned around to discover that the puppet bus had accidentally slipped into drive and had become trundling towards the toll booth. And as I watched in horror, it crashed into the arm of the toll booth, catching it into its grill, tearing off the back of the whole toll booth, and I watched it disintegrate, utterly destroyed. And still with the arm in its grill, the puppet bus with the trailer full of puppets behind it began slowly rolling down the gangway to merge into the Southern State Expressway. On this glorious Tuesday morning. So here's the thing I didn't know about toll booths. Do we have any toll booth operators in the audience? Great, so this is gonna be new for all of you also. Here's the thing, if you utterly destroy a toll booth, it sets off an alarm. I know what you're thinking, it's not like a car alarm, it's like an air raid siren. So people began to panic, and they began crawling out of their cars to look at what was happening. And what they saw was an empty puppet bus with the trailer and the arm in it, flying towards 500 cars, and me running after it, screaming, "No, please! Oh my God, the puppets!" This was my first job. So, I'm not embarrassed to tell you that to date, this is the most athletic achievement I've ever had, but I caught up to that goddamn thing. I Indiana Jonesed my way into it, and I put it in park firmly, and then I firmly pulled the parking brake, which it turns out is necessary. If I was licensed, perhaps I would have known that. And I walked back to the toll booth, and I sat down on the stoop and I began to cry. Because while I wasn't popular at this job and I wasn't good at this job, and this was my first job, so it was also a job I really needed. I was relying on that $3 an hour, and I knew I was about to be fired. Jimmy was 94. He'd been working there for 1,000 years. He could afford to set fires wherever, but probably not me. And the person who works at the toll booth, the one person who was like not the automatic robot thing, the troll that lived beneath the toll thing, came storming out with the broken pieces of the toll booth in his hands, and he skidded to a stop in front of me, and I could see him like gearing up, like a pitcher goes to throw a pitch to yell at me, and then he saw my blue Park Field Worker T-shirt, and he goes, ah, and he threw the pieces down. He goes, God damn it, you're a town of Hempstead employee, aren't you? And I looked up and I was like, yes. And he goes, do you know how expensive these goddamn toll booths are? You can't keep doing this. I looked up and I said, what? This is my first time. He goes, Jesus Christ, kid, I don't care. Let's get the hell out of here. I said, what? He goes, get out of here. So I got up, I ran off, and I scrambled into the puppet bus, and I put it into drive, and I started driving away. Not only did I not get fired, nobody even told my boss. And I understood the power that comes with like political connections, that I couldn't be fired. And we got to the park where we were gonna put on the puppet show, and the whole time this poor puppet lady on her first day of work has been following me. And she came up, and I'm happily setting up the sound equipment, and she says, I saw what happened at the puppet booth. At the toll booth. I said, yeah, that's how we get out of paying for tolls around here. We're gonna be doing that every day. And she laughed for a second, but I held her gaze until I saw this like spark of fear in her eyes that comes from when you realize like your one coworker that you know is completely unhinged and doesn't fear any consequences. It was glorious. So, here's the thing. I wish I could tell you that I did face consequences from that. I wish I could tell you that, like, my chickens came home to roost and I learned a valuable lesson. It's not true. Nothing ever happened. I could do whatever I wanted at that job. No one would ever fire me. I will tell you this, though. I did learn an extremely valuable lesson. And this has held true for, like, the 25 years since I've had that job. Which is that in that job, as in life, it is so much more important to be politically connected than it is to be talented. Thank you so much.
Yeah!